Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to our angst post-viewing discussion. Just got a few of us here, just a few logistics as we get started. I'm going to have the panel introduce themselves in just a second. For today's discussion, we're going to be talking about the film you watched, and talking about what you saw, and sharing ideas, sharing resources. We do want this to be interactive. You guys have a chat feature you can use. Go ahead and chat any questions you have in. We have a moderator keeping an eye on chat, and we'll push over questions as we go. We do have a list of questions that we're going to get started on. Questions that have been asked ahead of time, and those that have been through this with us in the past. We kind of collect the favorites, and so we want to share back some of that information. So a little bit as we get going, my name is Steve Nimmo. I'm the co-founder of Z-Cares Foundation, and we're super proud to have partnered with Castro Valley Unified School Districts to make this available for you guys. We were so happy, and that's really part of our mission is to provide resources and education and awareness around youth mental health. And it's really important to us that we do that at no cost to you. So we work as hard as we can to raise the funds outside of this activity to make this available to you guys at no cost. We don't think money should stand in the way of learning about mental health. It's really important to us. We're very passionate about this. Everybody you've got on the panel here tonight is super passionate about youth mental health and has great insight as sort of where we're going with that. The one thing that I just want you thinking about moving forward. So starting on Saturday is May 1st, Mental Health Awareness Month. Right? What a great time to really position yourselves to start thinking about mental health. So the one thing, if you take nothing else away from this evening, for the month of May, I'm going to challenge you, and you're going to hear me say this at the end of the night. I'm challenging you to start talking about your mental health. Start talking with your kids, with your parents, with your friends, with your, so on and so forth, about your mental health. Start having those real conversations, kind of getting beyond the "how are you, I'm fine," and that's the end of the conversation. So again, that's your challenge for Mental Health Awareness Month, is really start talking about mental health. Really, it's the tagline and the basis of Z-Cares Foundation is let's talk about it. And we want you, those of us here on the panel tonight, we're going to talk about it. We're going to have a real conversation. We've got a wonderful young panelist, Katie, who's going to share a fabulously inspiring story with you guys. And it's really important. And Katie is so open. She inspires me every day to keep going with what we're doing. So I think you'll enjoy that. And everyone has something great to say. So what I want to do, just to kind of kick things off and just start the process, I'm going to invite each panelist to unmute themselves and come on and introduce themselves, who they are, and why they're here, that type of thing. And I want them to also share, when they watched the film Angst, what stood out, what impression did the film leave with them as really that aha moment of how fabulous this film was. And I love this film, and you'll hear me say that over and over again. I've seen the film, and I'm not lying, I've seen it like 50 times now. We're lucky enough to have the producers of the film sit on our board of directors. So we get a little bit of insight. I've met a lot of the families that are in the film, and I'll share some of that along the way. But let's get started with those introductions. I'm going to take it as it's on my screen, and I know everybody's screen probably looks a little bit different. So starting at the top, I'm going to ask Nargis to come on and introduce herself and talk about her impression of the film.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nargis Dillon, and I'm here today as the am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm the executive director of crisis support services of Alameda County. So those are some of the perspectives I bring with me, as well as being a parent to a little one. And when the part of the film I really like, and more than one parent mentions this, but Karen herself says this in the film, which is when she realized how important the modeling was of naming her own feelings as a way to kind of create space for her son to do the same. So naming, like the other person in the film says, like naming when we're having a bad day at work and how we're dealing with it, and really normalizing negative emotion that way. I think that's something that I really like about the film, because that's very aligned with like how I approach this work, is that we can't ask like our children to engage with the world in a way that we're not willing to do ourselves, and that we're not kind of taking the risk to model for them. So that's a part of the film that I really like. And I also just like the recovery-oriented nature of the film. We know that like stories of hope and recovery can really get people through difficult times. And the film provides that. The film gives us, doesn't sugarcoat it. It doesn't say it's easy and you wake up one day and anxiety's gone, but it creates this image for us, this realistic image of what it takes to really work on ourselves, work as a family to get through a difficult time, and how it is about managing the anxiety, not trying to run away from it or trying to make it disappear all at once. So those are some of my favorite things about the film.
Well, thank you for that, Nard. I couldn't agree more about modeling our own, sort of vulnerabilities and whatnot. And it's something that I've tried to work on since actually watching the film. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, next up, Carrie.
Hi, I'm Carrie Kukoyi. I'm a school psychologist in the Castro Valley Unified School District, and I've worked at all of the levels, pre-K through adult, and I currently serve 2 elementary schools. And I bring my I'm a parent of 4 children as well. So I would echo everything that Nard just said in watching the film about those things that I took from it. In addition, I really loved the way that they discussed how everyone has anxiety. It's not a yes or no question. It's do you have it to a degree that is hampering your life, or is it something that you can manage? And the way that everyone talked about it so openly. I loved how brave all of those students were, all those kids that talked about their own anxiety, and they were willing to come on film and share it with all of us. I really loved how there were lots of different strategies that were demonstrated at the end, because although there are research-based strategies that work for anxiety, each person's journey is that person's journey. And you may have to try several different things before you find the thing or set of things that works for you. And so I think those were some of my biggest takeaways from the movie.
Great. Thank you, Carrie. You mentioned that everyone having anxiety, which I think is a great thing to bring up. And the first panel I ever sat on, we had a psychiatrist who he said exactly the same thing, but he put a little humor behind it. He basically said everyone has anxiety except sociopaths. Just to add a little bit in, but it's true, right? Everyone does struggle, and anxiety is a good thing, right? It tells us to jump out of the way of a car that's running towards us, right? To your point, we don't want it to control our lives. All right, so next up we have Natalie and Katie.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Natalie Hung, and I also work for the Castro Valley Unified School District, and I'm presently the school secretary at Castro Valley Elementary. The movie is impactful. It's real, it's relatable, and it's our reality. This is what's happening right now. And it shows that anxiety affects anybody at all levels. It doesn't discriminate. And you can be in elementary school and you can be an adult, you can be everything in between. And it's real for everyone. what I really like about that was that it offered so much hope. Those kids put themselves out there and explained themselves and defined every moment of their life. And just knowing that they have hope just warms my heart. And I'm so blessed to be a part of that and watch these kids and figure it out, walk their journey and find a really happy ending.
That was nice. Hi, my name is Katie. I am Natalie's daughter. I am currently a student at Diablo Valley College. I am pursuing a baking and pastry career. I've got a lot of aspiring dreams to be a writer and a baker and a business owner and a bunch of things like that. And my favorite part about the film is when Michael Phelps shows up and he tells his story. And just hearing something that this Olympic gold medalist has gone through, and you think that these celebrities have everything in the world and that they're happy because they have everything, anything that they could ever ask for. And like my mom said, mental health doesn't discriminate. And I think that's one of my biggest takeaways after seeing that film, and something that I've liked learning more about of people in the spotlight and things like that. When they share their story, that's even more impactful to me, because you know that just because that they're on this pedestal that we see them on, it doesn't mean that they're not experiencing the same things that we are. So that's my favorite part of the Angst film. And like everybody else said, just the fact that all these students are willing to share their story and to bring hope to others. And it takes a lot of bravery and it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable with people. And that's why I really love the film as well.
Well, thank you. And that's, yeah, the Michael Phelps bit is so fantastic. And one of the stories that we got from the producer is that take where he walks in on the little boy. That was one take. That was authentic, what you guys saw right there. I thought it was just a precious moment in the whole film. And then for them to share what each of them were going through, what a cool thing. And by the way, Michael checks in on him all the time. They're like lifelong friends now, which so it's really, really cool. So I'll share mine. And it's, you know, it's hard to pick a favorite. And so I'm actually gonna talk about a section in the film where it kind of leads into talking about it. And there's two young girls sitting and sharing, and one of the girls says, "If I didn't talk to my mom about it, I'm not sure I'd be here today." I mean, talk about a goosebumps chilling moment, you know, to hear those words and to know that because they talked about it, she's with us today. And, you know, thank goodness for that. And just through that whole section, you know, with the parents acknowledging, you know, that they knew that, oh, I need to acknowledge what they're going through is real, because it is real. You know, it's not a, you know, not a moment where we should be saying things like suck it up. It's a moment where we should be saying things like let's talk about it. I've noticed that, you know, you're feeling a little bit different right now. I actually just saw a question coming in. The film that's out there is the name of the film is Angst, if you haven't seen it yet, and we're going to put a link to the film in the chat right now. So that's available to you if you haven't watched it, and it expires at midnight. So as soon as we're done here, click the link and watch the film. It's on us, our treat for you to watch the film. So please do enjoy. Now we realize that the audience tonight is, you know, the primary school age, right? So a lot of parents could be saying, you know, what's the big deal? You know, I don't notice it in my kids. You know, I'm not really worried about it yet. I'll think about that in middle school. So there's a couple of reasons we wanted to do this. One is education and awareness, to really help you through what may be to come, but some of you may be in it right now, right? So we know statistically the average age of onset of anxiety is in the middle school age. Doesn't mean it can't show up in the early primary school ages. So it is education. Some of you may be going through some issues right now. So hopefully we can provide you that. Otherwise, we're providing you with some awareness and some tools you'll be out ahead of everybody else. So, thanks so much for jumping in. All right, so let's get into it. So I'm going to bring Nargis back on, and Nargis, if you can just, kind of help fill in some holes about, kind of what's going on with anxiety from a brain perspective, and any tools and tips that you may have along the way from your experience.
Sure. I think the easiest way to think about like what's happening with the brain during anxiety is, let's say we might all observe the exact same stressor. So we might all be watching a movie about snakes. And for all of us, that will start to kind of work our amygdala, which is right at the center of our brain, which is like trying to assess, is this real danger or not? Right. And then our prefrontal cortex, right behind our forehead, is our thinking brain. And that can usually tease out real danger from, let's say, watching a movie about snakes. We could almost find it hilarious that in this movie, snakes are doing silly things. And that's happening constantly throughout the day. Your brain is actually constantly like assessing situations. Is this a risk? Is this not a risk? How should I respond? And at times when it assesses something is truly a risk, it then sends a signal to like the back area here, the hypothalamus. And that's when you're trying to that's when like your heart rate goes up, your body kind of tenses, you're getting ready to like respond to a perceived threat. So that's kind of what people like to refer to as the fight or flight kind of response, right? So that is kind of what your brain is constantly doing. For those of us who live with anxiety, and I'm actually someone who lives with diagnosed anxiety disorder, sometimes we don't have access to our thinking brain as quickly or all the times that we need it. So that perceived danger really kind of might feel, let's say, exaggerated in the moment. So we're like reacting to something that like public speaking or presenting in front of a classroom, let's say on share day, in a way that seems kind of out of proportion to how others might respond to the same stressor. Others might be like, ooh, like, I wish I didn't have to present in front of the class, but I'm going to get up there and just get it over with. But there are people for whom that stressor of standing in front of the classroom, and that was one of the examples they gave in the movie, can feel so big that that day they just like cannot leave the house, or they are just literally stuck to their seat and they might start crying, especially when we're talking about like elementary school kids. They might not have the words to describe what it feels like. So we get crying, we might get like physical symptoms. And the pointer that I want to share around this piece is, as the parents or guardians in someone's life, we can be the providers of the menu of vocabulary that the kid could rely on in the future. That's something that I find helpful. So let's say if we notice something that our kid is responding to, saying like, oh, I noticed whenever blank is happening the next day at night, right before bed, you say you don't want to go to school tomorrow. Like, what are you thinking? And then being like, oh, it's because you're worried because you don't know how it's going to go. Or it sounds like the last time this happened, you didn't like how it went. So now you're worried it'll be the same way. So by giving those words, hopefully next time our kiddo can be like, I'm worried because I don't know how it's going to go, as opposed to relying on responding to the physical feeling of the anxiety and trying to share that with us. So I find that the most helpful in this younger age is really beginning to help them develop the vocabulary to tell us what's going on, because I don't think they're withholding, but we don't still have the tools to interpret our body's kind of signals and put it into words and try to explain to our grown-ups what might be happening.
Well, that is one of the best explanations I think I've ever heard. That was fantastic, and I like how you talk about stressors, right? And which are kind of those triggers of things happening, because aren't we in the middle of probably the greatest stressor that any of us have ever lived with, this pandemic? It's a global stressor, right? So it's certainly a time to keep a really close eye out for reactions to that stressor. And just because, I don't want to say ending, but just because, there's a light at the end of the tunnel for the health pandemic, typically the mental health side of things will lag behind what's going on from a physical health. So it's something to think about just over the coming months and year, just to keep an eye on, triggers from this global stressor. So thank you for that, Nargis. Carrie, so if you can maybe talk a little bit, just sort of going right off of everything Nargis just said, of what can parents look for as far as, signs and symptoms, or maybe, from your perspective, when you're talking to students, what do you look for signs of a, anxiety disorder or any mental health challenge?
I think when talking about, first of all, what parents can look for, partly it's what the impact is on the activities of daily living. Like I said before, everybody has anxiety, but if you are seeing that your child is suddenly not sleeping very well, or they're changing their friend group, or their grades or their ability to complete their work at school starts to slip, or they don't want to do the same fun things that they've been used to doing, I think if those things start to happen, then you might want to talk to your child and see how they're feeling. Also, the intensity of their feelings. It might be that they are talking to you about how they're feeling, and they're saying a lot of different comments. And so that both the intensity and the frequency of those comments is something that you want to look for. If it's something that they're bringing up and you can handle it by a conversation and then they move on, keep it in mind. But if you're seeing this over and over and it seems to be getting worse, I think that might be time to seek out some extra help or talk to somebody about it. If there are other incidents of concern that happen, something happens at school, some specific thing, maybe your child, since we're talking about elementary, maybe they are having bathroom accidents at school, or they don't want to go and participate on their soccer team, or there's an incident that comes up with another student in a soccer team, or you find them crying. Those are all things that parents should be looking for. And then the second part of your question, what do I look for when I see kids at school? It's all of those things that usually as a school psychologist, I become aware of those things because somebody brings it to me, like a teacher or a parent or the principal, and they've already noticed those things. And so those are the ways that I become aware.
No, that's great. Thank you for sharing all of that. And it kind of goes with a question I get asked a lot, which is, aren't they just being kids? And sometimes, yes. And I think Carrie said it really well of, that kind of persistent and excessive change in behavior is really something to keep an eye on, or not doing their favorite things anymore. Those are, I think, some great things to watch for. Excessive isolation. You mentioned the sleep. I think, it's such a great list of things, for parents just to keep in mind, to keep an eye out for. So thank you for that. And just, kind of sticking to the science side of things before we dig a little deeper into stories and examples, if I can go back to Nargis real quick, as far as, contributors to mental health, I read all the time, like, oh, this social media thing, it's driving the mental health crisis that's out there. In addition to that, and I'd love to hear your comments, but what about other drivers of school and work and social behaviors and that type of thing? If you can talk a little bit about just sort of some of the contributors there.
Sure. I think the first thing I want to say about like social media, I think we might want to like think about the generation of young people that we care for and we work with as not necessarily seeing it as separate from those things like school and work and stuff like that. It is an extension of it, not its own thing that takes a different space in their minds. And I think that's an important distinction, because a lot of times when I work with parents, they see things on social media. Well, that's just online. Like that's not real. Whereas I think that's due to the fact that like social media was introduced to adults at a later life stage. So it has a differentiation between what they might call real life and what's online. And what we see with young people who have grown up with life being online and in person, a combination, is that that differentiation doesn't really exist. So like if it's a point of contention when their feeling towards something online or their desire to be a certain way online is reduced or dismissed as being for online and not real, because I think the online world does feel equally real and an extension of the everyday world that they go into. When I think about the stressors, I think a narrow definition of success is one of the things that comes up for me when I think about like the things I end up hearing about. And that could be like maybe unique to the part of the world we live in, like living in the Bay Area. I think the idea of who is successful or how success is defined being tied to like quite a bit of economic success is not just enough to have a job, but you need a job that does X, Y, and Z, or it's not enough to go to college, to have to go to college that's X, Y, and Z. Those perceptions might be kind of just like in the air. I have families who swear to me like, I've never brought this up. I don't know where it came from. But we live in an environment that's hyper-focused on one kind of success. And that narrow definition of success can be really anxiety provoking. And in the movie, one of the mental health professional talks about sitting with elementary schoolers who worry about kind of their future. On the flip side of that, I would say I also sit with elementary schoolers who worry about basic needs, right? So we also live in an area where like income inequality is really prevalent. So we might have very young kiddos who are worried about their future and also very young kiddos who are worried about their family's income and whether or not their family could afford something, food, rent, and things like that. And imagine those two groups going to school together, and that difference in their realities could really impact both groups. So those are some of the things that I notice, I would say, that are magnified in our area, and especially during a time like the pandemic where economic hardships have been magnified, that the distance between the experiences young people having could be definitely a stressor.
Thank you for that. That was actually really good. And I like the conversation about, that you're seeing elementary school students coming to you with some of these stressors on their mind. So definitely something to keep in mind. All right, so shifting a little bit, I'm gonna talk to Katie a little bit here and have her share, and she's also the closest to probably remembering her elementary school days compared to the rest of the panel here. And maybe Katie, you can just talk a little bit about just the stress of school itself, right? To being accepted socially, and then the classroom and those types of things. And from your perspective, how can parents help their kids navigate some of those stressors?
Yeah, I think the earliest memory I can look back on in elementary school is probably 5th grade. And I remember feeling jealousy for the first time. And I didn't really know what that was. I just felt like one of my best friends from kindergarten had started getting close with this one other person. And I was like, well, but I'm her best friend. Why are you talking to her so much? And I didn't know what that was. It was just like this little seed inside of me that was making me feel like maybe I'm not good enough for her anymore. Like that's making me really sad. And I thought that we had a special connection. And in my little brain, I didn't think that, we had the capability of having more than one best friend. Obviously, that's not the case, and that's not what I believe in now. But at the time, I think I was stemming from the fact that I would talk to her every day. We would have lunch and do recess together, and now she was doing her homework with this other person. And I was maybe feeling anxious that I was going to lose her as a friend. And so I think it's things like that maybe might be impacting elementary school students, or even now. I think what Carrie said about noticing if your child is withdrawing from their activities and things that they really love, like they love soccer so much, they don't want to miss a practice ever, and then They don't want to go to practice anymore. They don't want to play games. It's like they don't even want to look at a soccer ball anymore. It's things like picking up on those types of things, of losing interest in your hobbies that mean a lot to you. And I know in the film, like these elementary school students are worried about their future, and I'm like, I wasn't thinking about my future in 5th grade. I was just thinking that I was going to be in middle school and how exciting that was. But I think kids nowadays are more observant than we realize. And even as a babysitter, some of those kids were they're so intelligent, and they just pick up on so many things. And I think being worried about school is just one of the least, should be the least of their worries, because life is so much greater than that. And I think it could stem from not doing well in a certain subject. I was horrible at math, always have been. And that created a lot of anxiety for me at a very, very young age, because I felt like I wasn't good enough. I felt like I couldn't do it. And so I think it's noticing your children's strengths and their weaknesses, and not making them feel bad about their weaknesses, but helping them work through that, and giving them extra help, tutoring lessons, anything like that that might help their confidence in moving forwards, and not feeling anxious about advancing in schools and how much harder things might be getting.
No, that's great. And from your perspective, how maybe you can just share of how the adults might help, sort of recognize some of the things you just explained, which I thought was fantastic, what you just said. And how can they help their kids navigate that? Because it's tough for a 9-10-year-old to navigate that.
Yeah, and I think it's also that they don't know what those emotions are, because I definitely didn't. Right. I don't know. I think it's maybe just me getting frustrated at the dinner table while doing schoolwork, and me breaking down into tears because I didn't understand something. I don't know. I mean, I think that's more of a question from you, Mom, as you observed me struggling. I mean, I don't know, because I'm not a parent, and I don't know what a parent would pick up on.
I think as a parent, especially in elementary kids, young kids are pleasers. They want to please their parent. And I think a lot of times these kids don't want to say no. So they'll pick up that extra sport, or they'll pick up that extra instrument because their parents suggested it. And because their parents suggested that, they automatically think that that's what they want. And they want to please you, and they want to please you as their child. And I've learned over the years, even now, that my child and any child, they can't do everything. I think they want to pick one thing or two things and really thrive on it and do their best. And that's what their passion is. And I really feel that these kids, when they have too much expectation and too much pressure, that's when they start feeling this anxiety and this horrible feeling or pressure of having to please everyone. And so when I saw Katie withdrawn, it kind of did make me going, what's going on here? And you have to play questions. You have to just ask. And if you don't get it from them, then you're going to probably end up calling their friends, parents, and just saying, hey, has so-and-so said anything about Katie being whatever? And you'll learn a lot from your kids' friends, parents.
And the teachers.
And their teachers, absolutely.
Yeah, great exchange there. That was really cool. And that one of the things we've learned along the way is the kids get this fear of disappointment. I think Natalie was referring to this, and I don't, as parents, I don't feel like I ever put this pressure, like you must be the best soccer player on the field, the best lacrosse player. I'm naming all the sports my kids played, but when my daughter has sat on these panels too, and she talks about that she always felt like if she missed an easy shot or tripped up on the field, that she was letting us down, right? And so somehow we are putting that pressure on her inadvertently. So I think it's important to again, back to talking about it, and just letting them know no matter what they do, how we're there for them. And it's so thanks for sharing that. So Katie, I'm going to stay with you for a minute. This is one of the things that inspires me about Katie is what she's been through, and what a wonderful young lady she's become through that. And so if you can just, not into the great detail, but just share briefly a little bit about your journey, sort of what you experienced, what you felt, and sort of how you came out to be who you are right now.
Yeah, I will condense it as much as possible and pick the good parts. And really it began, I think, in 8th grade. And I didn't really know what it was at the time. I was just kind of feeling sad for no reason. And at that point, I thought that there was something wrong with me because nothing was outwardly making me sad. There was no loss. There was, we were financially fine. It was just all these things in my life that was going great. And so I was feeling sad and I felt kind of horrible about that. And I internalized that and I didn't share that with my mom until freshman year when it started getting really bad. And I was becoming anxious and I experienced very deep depression, but my anxiety kept me from wanting to go to school, and I wanted to stay home. I needed to stay home. It was that point where I couldn't pass the threshold of my own bedroom door without the idea of just me breaking out into tears, because for whatever reason, I could not make it out the door to go to school. I was not being bullied. I had good friends. I bounced around from friend group to friend group because I didn't have anybody super close with that I could talk to about it. And so there was nothing really exciting me at school that made me have this drive to go to school. And so I would beg and beg and beg to just stay home, but I couldn't do it. I'm bawling my eyes out to my dad, begging him not to send me to school. And yet my mom would say, you got to go to school. And at that point, I was just so mad at her for that. I think I resented you a little bit because I thought I seemed so miserable, and I was miserable. I said, why would you make me go to school when I just feel like I physically cannot? And so at that point, my mom was saying, well, just try. And if you can't get through the entire day, then at least you know that you tried, and then you can come home. And so it soon became clear to me that I could not keep going to the school that I was at. It just wasn't a good fit for me. And that light at the end of the tunnel was an alternative for me. And that was to go to an independent study school. And I began to go to therapy. And my independent study school was the best move I could have made for myself because I'm a very independent person as is. And so I did school on my own from home. I would go in once a week and talk with my advisor, and she was almost kind of like a second therapist to me. I was one-on-one with her, and we got to talk about what was going on in my life, how schoolwork was going for me, and I got to get to know her on a personal level. And that move from that school coupled with therapy was really, really great for me. I refound my love for school because I always enjoyed learning. And my therapist really introduced me to a lot of coping mechanisms for my anxiety and my depression. And coping was something I had really never heard about. I didn't know what it was. But now coping and self-care is something I practice every single day. And it looks different for everybody, but that's where I'm at right now. I'm 2 years out of high school. I took a gap year, which was the most amazing thing ever. I'm so lucky I had a mom my mom and my dad who didn't pressure me into going into college right away. And they said, hey, if you want to take a gap year and explore what you want to do, learn what you want to do, that's fine by us, as long as you do have a plan to go to school. And I did. I worked a year. I enrolled in school all on my own. I'm still working at the same place. I'm still going to school. And I really found that I had a love for baking and pastry. And that's one of my self-care and coping mechanisms, is creating things. So that's where I'm at right now.
I don't know how many times I've heard Katie tell the story, and I love it every time. And
that's the condensed version too, Steve.
and I still love it. It's funny because before we even met Natalie and Katie, Samantha used to sit on, my daughter used to sit on panels with us, and she used to talk about, you don't need to take a traditional path. And it's like we were meant to meet this family because, here's a great example of, you don't need to take a traditional path. You take your path because your path is the correct path. And you can be, so successful, and it's just a great example that, you don't have to follow through like, oh, I must take 16 AP classes, and I must do this, and I must attend Stanford, and I must do this. And, your path is your path. And, everybody's is unique, and they just find their way. So I think it's an inspiring story of struggling with a mental health challenge, and really, grasping on to, things, she talked about coping, and grasping onto those coping skills of, to pull myself out, and seeing a therapist, for someone to, openly admit, hey, I saw a therapist. We know there's this word called a stigma that's out there of, if I see a therapist, that's a, taboo thing to talk about. Why is that different than seeing my pediatrician, right? You're just going to see somebody for help. So I think that's, thank you again for sharing your story. If we can kind of, talk a little bit, Katie talked about some of the symptoms she was experiencing when she was going through, and Carrie, maybe you can come on and talk a little bit about, if parents are noticing something going on with their kids, can you talk a little bit about, teen hormones, even preteen hormones kicking in versus, an actual mental health challenge, right? So, versus, mild anxiety all the way up to a disorder, right? I mean, you've got all these things going on. How does a parent know if they really should reach out for help?
I would go back to the list that I gave earlier on that. Sometimes it is really hard to tell, because all of the kids may be going through something and your child's doesn't look any different. But I think it's really important to think about those things that I described before, the frequency that you see it, and the intensity, and if their diet and sleep, and if that's being disrupted, or their leisure time activities are disrupted. And at the elementary level, I won't talk about teens, I'll leave that for tomorrow night, but fifth graders are certainly going through changes. And we see kids in fifth grade, they come in August, and when they leave us in May, they're definitely on their way to being teens. And so we do see a lot of concerns, a lot of the things that Katie was talking about with friends. And not that these things are limited to fifth graders at all. Adults, throughout your life experience those kinds of things. But if you see that your child is really not able to get past those things, and giving up some of their fun activities and not really able to have fun, then I think that you need to start paying attention to it.
Good, thank you. And one question we get a lot is, and I think that's great advice, everything that Carrie just shared of what to look for is, like, how do I know when it's actually time to reach out for help? My answer is very easy. If you're asking yourself that question, reach out for help. Is there any harm if going to a professional and just having it evaluated? I kind of equate it to, let's say you turn your ankle, and you wake up the next day and your ankle's swollen. You're like, oh, I wonder if I broke it. Should I see a doctor? You're probably going to go see the doctor. You have an x-ray, right? Same thing here. If you're feeling, should I go? Should I take my child in for some help? Yeah, do it. I think that's an important thing. And we'll talk about resources here in a little bit.
Steve, can I say something about
Yeah,
that
please.
real quick? About like when you know you need help. One of the ways that like I describe like getting help is just that like people who work with young people all the time, whether in a school setting or like your pediatrician, they just have a bigger sample size. You know, there's all like it's really hard to see changes in our own kids sometimes until there's been like a very drastic change in how things are going. It's harder to notice the incremental change. And like, I don't know, I only have one 5.5-year-old here in the house. So like, I don't know what all the other ones are doing. So sometimes like that makes it really hard. And I really like the one I have. So like, it makes it really hard for me to tell like, is this thing she's doing like normal, like within the normal range of behavior, or is this something that we need help with? And that happened for us with speech. I kept being like, she's little. And then at some point we consulted with her preschool teacher and they were like, yeah, you might want to take her to a speech person, you know? So like people who have a larger sample size sometimes can tell who are the people who are beginning to show some signs and symptoms in a way that those of us who got one or two at home just aren't able to notice with our own kids. So like, that's kind of how I tell other parents, like, don't feel bad. Like we just don't have enough in our home to tell sometimes if they're behaving in a way that we might need additional support with.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for that. That's a great ad. So, you know, Katie, if you've got a friend, or, you know, just friend that tells you, hey, I'm struggling, you know, with you know, my feelings, or they don't even tell you, you just know, right? You're noticing some of these things we're talking about, you know, something's changing, something's going on. What can you do to help support your friend through that?
It's as simple as just letting them know that you're there for them. If you're observing it, I definitely don't want to say, hey, what's wrong with you? You seem weird lately. Like that's definitely not the way to go. It's more towards just saying, hey, I'm always here if you want to talk to me about anything. I'm here for you. Can we go out for coffee, or can we just like hang out? And then maybe that'll start the conversation. If they're coming to you, that means that they can trust you, and that's just like the biggest honor for me. When my friend comes to me and saying that they need help with something, or they just need somebody to talk to, I just feel like I'm the person that they can trust, and that is huge for me. And I want to set time aside for them to talk with them and listen to them, and maybe not even give advice, just be somebody to listen to. And I think that's what everybody needs in their life. And when you observe it, with COVID now, it's hard because everybody was kind of forced to withdraw from social groups and social settings. And you ask if you want to go out, it's like, well, no, I don't really want to go out because COVID, you know? So I think that's really hard, but just making the time to watch a movie together on a streaming platform, FaceTiming with them, just doing something where you're just taking time to connect with people. It might not even be about talking about your mental health, but at least you're having some sort of conversation.
Well, thanks for that. That's actually all really good advice. And I think, you know, really, Katie really touches on, you know, approaching a friend, right? Letting them know you're there for them, and letting the conversation, you know, kind of develop from there is really, really, really well said. And, you know, maybe Natalie, from your perspective, you know, if you're, you know, your child, or, you know, even someone else's child you may be close to, what do you do if they don't want to open up to you, right? You know, you're noticing these things going on, but, you know, what can you do as a parent to, you know, to help, you know, sort of help support them, you know, even though they're, you know, they're being resistant to opening up?
The best advice I can give to parents right now is, if your child doesn't want to talk to you, don't feel hurt. Don't feel offended, because it's not about that at all. They just may not know how to talk to you. They are feeling things that they're not familiar with, but you just have to remember, as a parent, really don't feel hurt by it. When parents call me and ask me for alternatives, I easily will first tell them, reach out to their teacher. We have a counselor on site. I even have kids before the pandemic would come and talk to me before school, after school, during recess. Our school is a safe school. All of our schools are safe schools. We all of us really care about your kids. and we are here for them. So if you find that your kids aren't talking to you or can't talk to you right now, it's because they don't know how to about this particular subject. But once they actually reach out to their teacher, to a professional in our school, it gives them food for thought. And then they can come and talk to you and explain their emotions that they haven't ever felt before. And you guys will actually have a really meaningful conversation, and they'll bring you guys closer together. Parents, be patient. Be patient and understanding. The most important thing the thing that we all want for our children is to be happy, for them to be happy. So if it means seeking help somewhere else for them to get to that point, that's what we have to allow them to do.
Can I add that the unwillingness to share might stem from shame, because they think something is wrong with them and they don't want to be seen as a disappointment to their parents. And for parents, I think it's also important to be willing to learn and to be willing to listen. I know when I told you, you did a lot of research and you learned more about mental health in general. So it's not immediately saying like, no, you're just fine. You're just a kid. Like, you go through it. So I think it's letting them know that no matter what, you always love them. There's no reason for them to be ashamed. And that, you know, they can come to you with anything.
And parents as well. Parents can come to us as well. Your child can come to us as well to talk. But if you guys have questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to your school, whether you're at CVE, Independent, Jensen Ranch, Chabot, whatever school your home school is, reach out. The resources are there.
That's great. And what a great segue into our next topic, which is talking about resources that are available to us. So I want to hit this from several different angles. This is probably one of the most asked questions we get, which is, where do I begin? How do I do this type of thing? So let's start with Carrie and talking about the schools. Can we talk a little bit about, what are the schools doing to address mental health challenges with kids, and and how are the schools there as a resource to help families provide the support needed for the kids with their mental health challenges?
Well, I would echo what Natalie just said about reaching out to your child's teacher, who knows your child better than anybody else at the school, most likely, and feeling comfortable in doing that, and that there are a lot of other people on campus. But thinking about a broader perspective, I think as Katie said, there is a lot of shame around anxiety and depression, and I think our society still has a way to go with that. However, over the last several years, I've seen a real change in the Castro Valley schools and in schools in general about the recognition of anxiety and depression as conditions that our students have and that we need to address, and that are real and that are brain-based and that are not the fault of the person that is experiencing that symptom. So I think that recognition is a huge part of it. I'm guessing that everyone here has a student that attends a Castro Valley elementary school. So if you do, then you're probably aware that the school day starts with what's called SEL time, social emotional learning. And this has been magnified since the pandemic and since the murder of George Floyd last year, and having so many different anxiety causing events, COVID, families losing their jobs. And so we have really focused on having everybody have that opportunity to learn social emotional skills and have the opportunity to talk about social emotional issues. There also, all elementaries in Castro Valley have a counselor. It may not be a full-time counselor, but there is a counselor on staff, and these counselors are really knowledgeable about resources. And you can always start with your child's teacher or the school secretary, like Natalie, who does such a great job at Castro Valley Elementary. and get referrals to the school counselor. And that's different from what I do. I mainly deal with children who are referred for special education assessments, but our counselor is really, really knowledgeable and can refer you. I think also don't be afraid to call your child's pediatrician, because there are resources available through your insurance that have not been available in the past. And that's not obviously a school thing, but we would definitely encourage parents to reach out to the pediatricians. And our counselors also have, they do see some students, they see students in group. And so we do have those things available even at the elementary level. I would also say that you've come to the right place tonight. ZCares, I don't know if you've had a chance to go through the website, but there's a lot of resources available through this organization. And we're really lucky that they're partnering with Castro Valley to help us talk about anxiety and depression.
Well, thank you for that. And we'll actually put a link to our resources page out there in the chat for you guys to check out. But yeah, and all of those are great tips. I love the pediatrician. A lot of people don't realize you can start with your pediatrician, not just for physical health issues, but they're a great resource to help you kind of navigate the space and in finding additional resources that are out there. And maybe Natalie, you can talk a little bit, because I mean, you've obviously been down the path. I mean, Katie shared her story of, you know, getting a therapist and that type of thing. Can you share a little bit about your journey and helping her get connected with the support she needed?
Absolutely. At the time when my daughter was a freshman in high school, I was the special ed secretary at the district office. So I had a lot of resources, and I started with the obvious ones, the psychologists and the counselors that worked out of the district office. And I sat down and they listened to me. They listened to what I observed, what Katie was going through and my interpretation of it. And in my mind, I really thought, how can my daughter be depressed? How can she have anxiety? She comes from a loving home. She has everything she wants. She has everything she needs. And that's your first reaction as a parent. But then you start to think about what I need to do. How am I going to help my child? So then I'm online, I'm researching. School psychologists, school counselors gave me links and resources. I called the pediatrician and got names of therapists. Called my insurance company, and they'll give you a list of therapists in Castro Valley or whatever area you're in. And you call them and you just interview them over the phone and find out what they offer and what services they provide and how frequent and what their take is on medication, what their take is on just outlets and other resources. So parents, there's so many ways out there that you will be able to help your child through any type of anxiety and the depressions that they're struggling with. The resources are there. Go to ZCare's website. You can come to the office. You can even call me. Even parents who are not within Castro Valley Elementary, by all means, please give me a call. I'd be more than happy to point you into other directions. But listening to your child and then making all those things happen.
That's great. Thanks for that. And it's sort of a great story of different places you can reach into to get those resources. And if I just some of the things that are available, particularly for adults. So ZCares does train adults in what's called youth mental health first aid. We've got certified trainers. I'm actually one of them. And we actually have a couple of classes coming up near the end of May and a class in early June. If you want to sign up, please join us. It's an investment in time. It's probably a total of 8 hours ish of investment, and it's a very powerful event to go through. The class is actually free. We do ask for a $25 deposit because we have to reserve your seat with the National Council, and that just helps us reserve the seat. We'll pay you that back. ZCares will actually cover your seat in the long run. It just helps us get everything reserved and that type of thing. Join us, please. And so those events, and we've also a few other resources that are non-professional resources. that particularly the kids might enjoy. My daughter actually runs a podcast called Sit Down with Sam, and it's we'll put the link out there to the page. It's on all the major podcast players, and one of her interviews is with Katie. You want to hear more about Katie's story? They go into a little bit more detail. It's one of my favorite episodes, and it's you know, and it's conversations like that. They talk about real things, real people talking, you know, sharing their real stories and sharing hope. And the hope is that the youth can connect with someone in those stories and really feel like, oh, that's me. I'm going through that right now, but look, she made it through. This is how she made it through, and provide some modeling. So we've got a few other, you know, content items out there on the website that we invite you to enjoy. I'd also like to invite Nargis to come on, and, you know, particularly as, you know, from the Crisis Center, as a resource, if you can talk about that a little bit, and just, you know, feel free to add anything else to help parents along. One of the questions that we got was, you know, where can we find a therapist? I think we've talked about that a little bit, but if you have other angles, because there's different paths you can take to, you know, finding that therapist, but you could share a little bit.
For sure. I'll put a link here just for the page that specifically talks about our text line. It's geared toward older kiddos who might have like a phone and things like that, but I think it's helpful for parents to know. And at the top of the banner, you will see our 24-hour crisis hotline number. We're located here in Oakland. We have staff 24/7, usually on site, currently mostly from home. But these are folks who can talk to you, who can hear you out. And one of the things I always share with people is you don't really have to wait till you're in crisis to call us. People do call us for emotional support. They do call us just to kind of for resources, to vent. We get about 40,000 calls a year on the crisis line, and about 10% of folks have any, I would say, are in crisis in the moment that they're calling. People call because they're worried about someone. So we really want to encourage people to use that resource. Two things that came to mind as I heard other folks speak was, one of them was having this realistic expectation for help seeking, meaning like sometimes the first therapist we try, or if people go the medication route, the first thing we try just might not work, and that's not the end of it. So at the beginning being like, you know, we're going to go talk to this person, and like they're going to help us talk about our feelings or whatever we want to say, and if this one doesn't end up being a good fit for our family, we can always try someone else. We'll figure this out together. So we're using that hopeful language, but we're also creating like realistic expectations around the efficacy of therapy or even like medication, because especially with things like anxiety and depression, when we first start talking about it, man, do you feel it a little bit more at the beginning of therapy, and it takes like a little while before the symptoms begin to like actually go down. So especially like for everyone, really, I always want people to have a realistic expectation. It's hard to talk about things that are hard for us, but we'll get through this together. And the other piece is encouraging the parents to seek help for themselves. Depending on the severity of the situation and how much it's impacting your family, it could be impacting the partnership between the parents if there's a co-parent. It could be impacting the sense of self of the parent themselves, because they might begin to question like every decision they've ever made, from like, should I have bought different formula to, you know, so like instead of going down that rabbit hole of blame and shame, getting support for yourself, I think is really helpful as you're being a support person to someone else. I'll also include another link here from Stanford that has some specific resources around parents for children with anxiety, because I think when we have information, we feel more confident, and that sense of control can kind of carry over to the young people that we're trying to support.
Thank you for that. That's great. And you know, and I'm looking at the clock, and I want to make sure we wrap up on time. So you know, just sort of going back to Katie before we all wrap up our conversation. Maybe you can talk a little bit about, you know, from a youth perspective, what resources are out there, and, you know, and feel, you know, lean on your own experience of what you use to, you know, obviously, you know, your family helped you get connected to therapists and things like that, but what else is out there? It doesn't have to be all seeing a professional.
Yeah, for me, now more than ever, I follow, this is maybe not related so much to elementary school, but for me, I follow a lot of self-care and mental health social media accounts. That way, my entire feed isn't just pictures of people who you see living their best life, but maybe that's not completely the reality. So instead, I see encouraging posts about taking self-care time for yourself, or a mental health fact of the day, things like that that are incorporated into my feed of social media. And that kind of almost reminds me to maybe take a little break. If I'm seeing that, I'm like, okay, I should probably take a break from that. And there are podcasts now, which is so awesome. Being on one was one of the coolest things ever. It's reading a book, watching your favorite movie, listening to music. And that they can be resources, I think, because these songs might be relating to somebody's journey. And then you're thinking, wow, this person wrote a song about feeling sad. And that means that they might be going through that, and I can relate to that. And so I think that's really powerful. And music is a universal language, and it's something that everybody of all ages listens to. And there's something out there for everybody. So I think that's what I think.
That's great. It's I think, and why I like Katie to share those types of things. The list is endless.
Yeah.
And what works for me or what works for Katie may not work for your kid or work for you, right? It's finding that thing that really helps, bring calm to your body when it's so needed. So it can be a journey to find that thing, but it's there's so many great items out there. One thing I did want to throw out as a resource that is coming up actually next week. There's an event called Mind Out Loud, and we're going to put a link out there. It's designed for youth to attend. It's free. This is not put on by ZCares. It's put on by Mind Out Loud, but a similar organization that's really dedicated to improving youth mental health. It's free to register if you want to get on there. Our daughter is actually speaking at it on May 5th, I believe, and so it's just another resource. So I wanted to throw that out there. They made us aware of it, and we'd love to share it out for anyone to sign up and check it out. All right, so we're rolling down on the end of the hour here, and I want to allow any time. I don't know. I'll pause for just a second if we have any additional questions that are waiting, or if we feel like we've addressed everything that's out there. Okay, so I think we're good on the questions that are there. So what I'd like to do now is just allow the panel to kind of leave their ending thoughts, right? So the thoughts I'd like to leave with the adults and the youth that are in the audience, and just a final message. So we'll go through on my screen again. So we'll start with you again, Nargis.
Sure. I think one thing that didn't come up tonight is sometimes people ask me like how to start the conversation with the young person in their life. And I'll say things like using things in the media as a way could be helpful. Like if you see a character on TV, or you hear about someone that they talk about who seems to have a mental health challenge, like having positive regard toward that character and being like, hey, when you see this, what do you think about? Or that's a good way to kind of start the conversation. Or even saying like, I went to an event the other night at your school and they were talking about this. Is this something that has come up for you? But I will say like our young people are always looking. So make sure that like if they tell you a story, or if you're watching a movie together, the way you react to individuals in that movie that have mental health challenges sits with them. So I would really highly recommend that we don't dismiss individuals with mental health challenges when they're being portrayed in the media, or if you see them portrayed inaccurately, being like, it's really messed up that they're showing this person like this. Most people with a mental health challenge don't act this way. And that's how you kind of get used to the conversation. So the day that you're talking about them is not the very first time you're potentially talking about this topic in your home.
Thank you. Carrie.
I really love everything that's been shared tonight. about all of the different ways that parents can reach out to their kids. I know one of the things that used to work for me was I'd spend long hours driving with one of my kids, and with 4 children, I really tried to take time to get them one-on-one when I could. And sometimes just providing that opportunity to be in the car where you're there together, listening to music, is kind of a safe space for kids to ask questions. A couple of things that I haven't heard that I do want to throw out as food for thought is to mind your child's physical care as well. And I'm talking about things like sleep and making sure that they go to bed at an hour that's appropriate for their age, with the removal of screens, and the diet that supports their physical health, and to get enough exercise. And I think particularly in the pandemic, it's been kind of challenging to do that because our children have spent so much time in front of screens, and not that much time running around like they usually do. I also think that one thing that we need to be mindful, particularly with elementary children, is to think about the news that's coming into your home, from the television or whatever other sources that you have. And now you can turn on the TV and you're almost guaranteed to see something about COVID. A lot of articles about that, or about there's a lot of talk about murders on the news. And so think about what is appropriate for a 5 and a 6 and a 7-year-old, and kind of monitor that. And I also loved what the film was talking about, and what we were talking about earlier about modeling good mental health yourself, and managing your own anxiety. If your child is having a problem, this is not your fault. And I want to make sure that you take that from this, that we're here, we're giving advice, but we're not saying these things because we're blaming at all. We are trying to give some ideas to you guys, but I think that it's very helpful if you can model the kinds of things that you want your child to be doing, and just to provide that environment where they can ask those questions.
Thank you. That was great. Natalie and Katie.
I want to echo what Carrie. First of all, I want to thank the parents. Thank you so much for attending. By your attendance, you're obviously recognizing that there's either a need or a want to learn more, something that maybe is affecting your family. So just to be here tonight is a big step. And I just want to say how much we appreciate that you took the time and spent this 90 minutes with us. That speaks volumes as a parent, that you want to help your child and you want to learn and educate yourself how you can help not only your child, but your entire family, because it does affect everyone. So I thank you for coming. Please remember that we are here to assist you no matter what school you attend. Please reach out to the school district. Feel free to reach out to myself and I will point you into the direction. But you're never alone. Just always remember that.
I think that's really important to remember. And it's also important when you're so concerned about your child that you almost forget to take care of yourself. And I think now I'm checking in on her a lot. I'm like, are you okay? Have you taken time for yourself? Because you can't take care of others if you have no fuel left in your tank. And obviously I can't speak from a parent's perspective, and you guys work so hard. I mean, hats off to you. You guys are all just amazing. So obviously there's a lot going on in your life. And I hope that you can find a little corner in your house where you can be able to just have that moment for yourself. That way you can be there for your children and the rest of your family. I think the biggest thing is to just listen and be willing to learn and have no judgment, and just as much as you can, just fill your space with love, because then your children will feel that.
Well, I feel like there's nothing left for me to say. What a great series of comments from everyone, and you know, I echo every word that was just spoken. You know, you are definitely not alone. Sometimes, and trust me, I know we've been down this journey, and people are there to support you, and let them support you, to be a part of it. And it's you know, like I said in the beginning, it's May 1st is the beginning of mental health awareness. Let's dedicate ourselves to being aware, right? It's you know, build our knowledge and build our understanding, and of anything else, as it says behind me over my shoulder, talk about it, right? And that's there's a healing in having those conversations, both for the parents, the kids, the adults. You know, there's a healing process. So again, I'm going to challenge you to jump out there and have those conversations. And to help you out, ZCares actually has a resource on the site where you registered, which is the zcares.org/CVUSD. And I think that's going out right now. At the bottom, under all the registration stuff, we've put some documents on there. There's two in particular. One is what we call Z-Talks Family. Z-Talks is a discussion series we do. Z-Talks Family is a self-guided discussion. It has some resources in there from professionals. It talks about how to help a friend in need, you know, some tips and tricks. But at the end, there's just a guide for the family to sit together and have a conversation, a real conversation. And we challenge you to use it. And please do. The other document on there is what we call our My Action Plan. It's comes with a workbook and a full template to fill out. And the idea there, and maybe, you know, some of the elementary students may be a little young, but, you know, quite honestly, I can use it as an adult too. And really it helps you identify, you know, what are my triggers? What are my, you know, what sets off my mental health state? What can I do, right? What can I do to help calm myself in those moments? And what are some, to what Katie was talking about, what are some of the self-care things I can establish to make sure I do? Because I'm as guilty as everybody of sometimes forgetting to take care of myself, and I feel the tank running low, right? And, you know, so it's time to practice some of those. And also there's a list at the bottom. Who can I talk to, right? So write them down, put the phone number on there, take a picture, keep it on your phone, make it a favorite. So if, you know, like, boy, I really could talk to somebody, there's your list. Because I'll guarantee you, some people may be saying, I don't have anybody to talk to. You do. You have somebody to talk to. There's somebody out there that wants to talk to you. If you can't come up with anybody on the list, NAR just talked about the crisis line. They're there to listen. You know, you don't have to be in crisis to call. If you need to talk to somebody, there is always somebody to talk to. And please do. Please be a part. So again, I can't thank the attendees as much. We don't often do this for the elementary school, and I'm glad we did, because you can get out ahead of things and really educate yourself and, you know, sort of the years to come. So thank you for being a part, and most importantly, thank you to this amazing panel. You guys were fantastic. Every time I do one of these, I pick up a new nugget myself that I'm like, ooh, I need to talk about that next time. So thank you for being a part of, you know, this important evening and you know, sharing an important message. And don't forget, if you haven't seen the film, you now have 4 hours and 6 minutes to wrap it up before it disappears off the free list. But please do enjoy it. If you've watched it already, go watch it again. You know, maybe you'll pick up a new nugget. Like I said, I've seen it a bunch of times, and it's, you know, it's out there. Nargis just put in the chat, it's only 45 minutes, right? So it's a pretty quick watch. And these are real people. I've met so many of them. Jim and Sarah, the father and daughter who talked. We had Christmas dinner with them before COVID happened, but what a neat family they are. And to see them today versus where they were in that story is pretty cool. Andy, who opens up the film, he sat on one of our panels right before we all got sent home for a year. And it was cool to watch his story of kind of where he is now versus where he was in the film. And it's inspiring, to see that. So please do enjoy. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, panel. Thank you, audience. And, have a great evening.
Good night. Thanks for having us.
Good night.